Good afternoon, everyone. I am Angelica Macy Aurelio, and for today's meeting, I will be your FA/tour guide and join me as we explore the marvelous country of Canada. Canada ticks all the boxes. Whether you're a hardcore adrenaline junkie, a nature enthusiast, or a city slicker searching for cutting edge culture. The enormous Canadian prairies climb suddenly to the glacier-topped Rocky Mountains. Magnificent unspoiled coasts give way to immense forests and green lakes, and Arctic waves lap against frozen tundra in the world's second largest country by total area. Surprisingly, this wilderness also contains cosmopolitan cities, quirky communities, and isolated indigenous populations. Covering nearly 10 million square kilometers spread across 10 provinces, there's enough space and diversity in Canada to do pretty much whatever you like. Watch abundant wildlife such as moose, whales, and an array of bears. Experience world-class outdoor adventure. Sample the sophisticated cultural scene in Canada's city. Soak up the mountain scenery, and of course, embark on a road trip of a lifetime. So, for today, I'm going to be discussing Canada's history, geographic location and characteristics, culture, government, currency, economic status, and of course, must go attractions. But before that, let me ask you guys a question. So, whenever you hear Canada, what comes first into your mind? Is it Canada's famous maple syrup? Or is it Canada's maple leaf flag? Or is it the hat Canadian hockey players? Or is it your Canadian boyfriend if you have one? As for me, when I hear Canada, the first thing that comes into my mind are my family and relatives from father's side because they are permanently residing in Canada. I know most of my friends here knew that I really wanted to live in Switzerland, but I do consider living in Canada as well. So now for the advertisement, let's proceed to introducing Canada again. Canada is a country in North America. Its 10 provinces and 3 territories extend from the Atlantic to the Pacific and northward into the Arctic Ocean, covering 9.98 million square kilometers, making it again the world's second largest country by total area. Moreover, Canada is a country with dual nationality, French Canada and English Canada, which has its roots in the British conquest of the French colony around Quebec and Ontario in 1760. This dual heritage dominates the political and societal issues pertaining to the country and has, to a certain extent, polarized its people. The French speaking community are firstly defensive of their cultural origins and their language and have been resistant to assimilation. The name Canada is said to be derived from the Huron Iroquois word Canada, meaning village or settlement. According to the traditional lore, the name became common among Europeans during the early colonial period and is rooted in a misunderstanding by French explorer Jacques Cartier, who believed it to be the traditional Aboriginal name of the lands he had discovered. On the right side, you can see the official provinces of Canada and its corresponding codes and abbreviations. Now, I've done introducing Canada to you. Now we will be proceeding to its history. So, according to the information that I had gathered, the first people to come to Canada arrived between 15,000 and 30,000 years ago across a land bridge that joined Asia and North America. So that land bridge is called Beringia or Bering Land Bridge. It is any in a series of landforms that once existed periodically and in various configurations between northeastern Asia and northwestern North America. Around 1000 AD, the Viking explorer Leif Erikson reached Newfoundland, Canada. He tried to establish a settlement there, but sadly, it didn't last. In the early 16th century, the Europeans started exploring Canada's eastern coast, starting with John Cabot from England between 1534 and 1542. So, John Cabot was an Italian navigator and explorer. His 1497 voyage to the coast of North America under the commission of Henry VII of England is the earliest known European exploration of coastal North America since the Norse visits to Vinland in the 11th century. However, French arrived. Jacques Cartier made three voyages across the Atlantic, claiming the land for King Francis I of France. Cartier had two captured guides speaking the European words Canada, meaning village. So Cartier is a French Breton maritime explorer for France. Jacques Cartier was the first European to describe the map or the Gulf of the St. Lawrence and the shores of the St. Lawrence River, which he named the country of Canadas, after the Iroquois names for the two big settlements he saw at Stadacona or Quebec City and at Hochelaga or Montreal Island. In 1950s, the name of Canada began appearing on maps. Part of Canada were settled by France and some parts by Great Britain. In 1605, Port Royal was built in Acadia by Samuel de Champlain. 3 years later, he started settling in Quebec. So Samuel de Champlain was also a French colonist, navigator, cartographer, dropsman, soldier, explorer, geographer, ethnologist, diplomat, and chronicler. He made between 21 and 29 trips across the Atlantic Ocean and founded Quebec and New France on July 3, 1608. On the same period, the French and the Aboriginal people collaborated in the vast fur trade economy driven by the demand of beaver pelts in Europe. So, in this period, beaver pelts became heavy favorites of hat maker and winter clothing maker in Europe as it can withstand the cold temperature there. Outstanding leaders like John Talon, Bishop Laval, and Count Frontenac also built a French empire in North America that reached from Hudson Bay to the Gulf of Mexico. In the 1700s, France and Great Britain battled for control of North America. In 1759, the British defeated the France in the Battle of Plains of Abraham in Quebec City, marking the end of the France Empire in America. Following the war, Great Britain renamed the colony the Province of Quebec. The French-speaking Catholic people, known as habitants or Canadians, strove to preserve their way of life in the English-speaking British Empire. So, before Great Britain renamed the colony as the province of Quebec, it was once known as the New France. After the American Revolutionary War, many people in the United States wanted to stay loyal to Great Britain. Thousands came north to Canada and settled in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Quebec, and Ontario. During the War of 1812, the United States tried to conquer Canada, but sadly they were defeated. In 1867, the province of Canada were joined by two other British colonies of New Brunswick and Nova Scotia for confederation, forming a self-governing entity named Canada. Canada's soldiers fought for World War I for Empire. More Canadians died in this war than any other war. In 1917, women were given the right to vote by the end of the war, partly because of the help they gave making weapons of the men who fought in Europe. In 1931, Canada became fully independent. Then the government of Canada made all decisions about Canada. The British Parliament passed the Statute of Westminster in 1931, which acknowledged Canada as co-equal of United Kingdom and the other Commonwealth realms. The Canadian economy boomed during World War II as its industry manufactured military materials for Canada, Britain, and China. Despite another crisis in Quebec in 1944, Canada finished the war with larger armies and a strong economy. In 1960s, the Quiet Revolution took place in Quebec, overthrowing the old establishment, which centered on the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Quebec, and led to modernizing the economy. Same period, Canada adopted the maple leaf flag, although not without considerable debate in these givings among large numbers of English Canadian society. In 1981, the Canadian House of Commons and Senate passed a resolution requesting the British Parliament enact a package of constitutional amendments which would end the last powers of British Parliament to legislate in Canada and would create an entirely Canadian process for constitutional amendments. Moving forward to Canada's geographic location and geographical characteristics. Canada, second largest country in the world, in area after Russia, occupying roughly the northern two-fifths of the continent of North America. Canada is a vast and rugged land. From north to south, it spans more than half of northern hemisphere. From east to west, it stretches almost 4,700 miles across six time zones. It is the second largest country in the world, but it has only one half of 1% of the world's population. So Canada being known as the second largest country on earth, yet over 80% of the country's land is uninhabited, and most Canadians live clustered in handful of large cities close to US borders. This reality stems from Canada's unique geography, which is all things considered rather unfriendly to humans. Canada features black blue lakes, numerous rivers, majestic western mountains, rolling central plains, and forested eastern valleys. The Canadian Shield, a hilly region of lakes and swamps, stretches across northern Canada and has some of the oldest rocks on Earth. Canada's far north lies in the frozen reef of the Arctic, where ice, snow, and glaciers dominate the landscape. Few trees grow there, and farming is not practical. That's why Native Canadian or the First Nation people that live in that region, they live by hunting and fishing. Canada's nature. So Canada's remote north and extensive forests are home to wildlife, from bears, wolves, beavers, deer, mountain lions, and bighorn sheep to smaller animals like raccoons, otters, and rabbits. The country's lakes and rivers, which contain about 20% of all the fresh water on Earth, are full of fish such as trout and salmon. Canada's prairies in the south are home to bison and pronghorn antelope. Farther north are Canada's sprawling evergreen forests, which have lots of wildlife including moose and black bears. Even farther north is the cold, bare tundra where herds of caribou and musk ox alive. Canadians work hard to protect their native wildlife. Canada has 41 national parks and 3 marine conservation areas. Nevertheless, species like wolves, lynx, and Atlantic fish have been overhunted and overfished. The Canadian landmass. So you can see it on the left side of the screen. That's how the Canadian landmass look like. So Canada occupies the top half of the North American continent, where it borders the United States, its only neighboring nation to its south and northeast via the isolated state of Alaska. Canada's national motto, Amare Osque ad Mare, or from sea to sea, captures the vastness of the nation, as the country quite literally stretches from the Pacific Ocean on its western coast to the Atlantic Ocean on its east. Some have even suggested adding a third sea in the motto to reflect the fact that the country reaches high enough north to touch the Arctic Ocean as well. The story of Canadian geography unfolds in two directions, west to east and north to south. The more north you go, the colder, rockier, snowier, and overall less suitable for living the country, which explains why few people go through the hassle. From west to east unfolds the more livable portion, and a vast array of geographical diversity encompassing everything from lush green valleys to dry, sandy deserts. Moving on to the west coast. The west coast of Canada, known by geographers as the Cordillera region and containing the province of British Columbia, is the most mountainous part of the country, defined by the coastal range mountains that stretch down from Alaska along Canada's borders with the Pacific Ocean. Farther east lies the Canadian portion of Rocky Mountains, which forms British Columbia's border with the province of Alberta. Both ranges are home to massive evergreen forests and diverse assortment of wildlife that have historically formed the world's stereotypical image of Canadian nature. Between two Pacific mountain ranges lie rich, green valleys as well as small, warm, dry region in the southern interior of British Columbia known as the Okanagan. Insulated by the mountains, this desert-like area has proven a hospitable climate for growing fruits and vegetables, making it a natural home for some of Canada's largest orchards and wineries. So that's the full map of Canada. As you can see, Alberta is beside British Columbia. On the first picture, you can see Mount Logan. It is Canada's tallest peak and the second highest mountain in North America, which is located close to the Yukon-Alaska border. And on the second picture, you can see the map showing the distribution of forested area across Canada. So as you can see, it's really huge. And note that the barren areas in the southwestern Canada and the far north. On the third picture, you can see a dense forest in Port Renfrew, British Columbia. So this is the old growth forest on the islands of British Columbia that is home to some of the oldest, tallest trees in Canada. The Canadian prairies. Moving east from the Cordillera region, the land dramatically flattens and the mountains disappear. This vast territory known as the prairies contains the provinces of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba and houses some of the driest, least forested parts of the country. Wide open fields and flat arable land make the region the base of Canadian agriculture. Parts of the southwestern Alberta are quite barren, however, with an arid, desert-like landscape known for its rocky soil and Hoodoo's massive gravity-defying stone formation. So Canadian Prairies is a region in western Canada that contains the portion of the Great Plains and the mentioned prairie provinces. On the left side, you can see the rocky terrain of the Canadian Baldlands located at Drumheller, Alberta. So this is also an example of the plains. This is Alberta's Wood Buffalo National Park that is 129,656 square kilometers. So that is how huge it is. Moving on to central Canada. Central Canada containing the country's two largest provinces, Quebec and Ontario. It is part of a massive geographic landform known as the Canadian Shield that gives much of the country its distinctive shape. Scooped out by the giant Hudson Bay to the north and bordered by four of the five Great Lakes, Lake Superior, Lake Huron, Lake Erie, and Lake Ontario to the south. Also known as the Florentian region, it is mostly green landscape of rolling hills, grassy fields, and deciduous forests topped by barren and rocky north. Both Ontario and Quebec are dotted with thousands of small lakes and rivers, many of which are surrounded by moist wetlands and home to iconic Canadian animals such as beaver and moose. Most human residents on the region live in what is known as the Great Lakes St. Lawrence lowlands, which you can see on the third picture. It is an area that stretch of low elevation and fertile farmland located around the coast of Lake Ontario and the massive St. Lawrence River, both of which flow out into the Atlantic Ocean. Atlantic Canada. Farther east, we have the Appalachian region, encompassing the four Atlantic provinces of Newfoundland, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and Nova Scotia, which are all either islands or peninsulas on the eastern coast of Canada that extends into the Atlantic Ocean. A mix of rocky coasts and forested interiors, the landscape of Atlantic Canada, also known as the Maritimes, have been shaped by its proximity to the ocean. With steep cliffs, high tides, and long coastal ports, much of the interior is densely forested and low in elevation, though the Appalachian mountain range does extend into parts of northern New Brunswick and Newfoundland. In contrast to other parts of Canada, the small Atlantic provinces are known for being densely populated, and only Newfoundland features large portions of entirely uninhabited land. Emptiest of all is the barren territory of Labrador, which, although officially part of Newfoundland, is located on the rocky northeastern tip of Quebec and is home to the Coronat Mountains, Canada's tallest range east of the Rockies. The northern Canada. The Canadian North is a somewhat vaguely defined region, all the provinces, save the Maritimes, that contains dry, largely barren, and mostly uninhabited northern areas, prone to long, cold winters, heavy snow, and perpetually frozen soil. In a more specific sense, however, the capital in North usually means the vast northwestern half of Canada that contains the country's three northern territories. Yukon, Nunavut, and less creatively named Northwest Territories. Though Yukon possesses a more forested Cordillera-style environment in contrast to Nunavut and the Northwest Territories, all of the three are mostly rocky, barren terrain with only sparse vegetation. The extreme north of Canada, where virtually no humans live at all, is an archipelago of massive islands covered by snowy tundra, vast frozen glaciers, and towering mountains, home to polar bears, seals, and narwhals. But very little plant life and almost no human beings. This unique and exotic region forms an important part of Canada's image, even it's an area few will ever visit in person. So Canada has four seasons. Winter, which happens during December to March, mild autumns during September to December, pleasant springs during March to June, and warm summers during June to September. Now we are finished with Canada's geographic location and characteristics. We are moving forward to Canada's culture and society. Culture is an obviously broad category that can include any number of topics depending on who's setting the terms. In this section, we're going to look at culture as Canadians traditionally define it, which is to say, the collection of things that provides a sense of purpose and patriotism to residents of the country, including both cultural products and social attitudes. People and culture in Canada. In some ways, Canada is many nations in one. Descendants of the British and French immigrants make up about half of the population. They were followed by other European and Asian immigrants. First Nations people make up about 4% of the population. Inuit people live mostly in the Northwest Territories and Nunavut. Many native Canadians live on their traditional lands, but many others have also moved to the cities across Canada. First Nations artwork is widely recognized and is seen as a symbol of Canadian culture. Here are are the major celebrations celebrated in Canada? Of course, New Year's Day, Good Friday, Easter Monday, Victoria Day. Victoria Day is a federal Canadian public holiday celebrated on the last Monday preceding May 25. Initially, this is celebrated in honor of Queen Victoria's birthday. It has since been celebrated as the official birthday of Canada's sovereign. It is formally considered to be the beginning of the summer season in Canada. Next is Canada Day. So, Canada Day is a national day in Canada. It is a federal statutory holiday as it celebrates the anniversary of the Canadian Confederation, which occurred on July 1, 1867, with the passing of British North. Another major celebration is Labor Day that occurs first Monday of September. Thanksgiving Day. Thanksgiving Day or Thanksgiving is an annual Canadian holiday held on the second Monday of October, which celebrates the harvest and other blessings of the past year. Outside of Canada, it is sometimes called Canadian Thanksgiving to distinguish it from the Thanksgiving in the United States held in late November. Another major celebration is Remembrance Day. So, Remembrance Day is a designated day across the country of Canada to commemorate those who fought for Canada's freedom. It is the day that Canadians encourage every individual, young and old, to give thanks and to remember the lives of their fallen heroes. Last two major celebrations in Canada is of course Christmas Day and Boxing Day. So what is Boxing Day? Boxing Day is observed annually on December 25th or 26th. To the I mean it is observed annually in Canada, the UK, and other Commonwealth countries around the world. So, Boxing Day was traditionally the day employers would give their staff Christmas present called boxes to celebrate the Christmas season. But since the day after Christmas is now usually a statutory holiday in our modern society, they now often give those boxes to themselves. Moving forward to the manners and etiquettes in Canada. So the stereotype of the polite Canadian may be cliche, but it does have some of the basis in reality. Canada is a nation with fairly strong conventions of social etiquette, and properly obeying and understanding these rules is an important way to fit into the broader Canadian society. In general, Canadians are mostly friendly, unpretentious people who value honesty, sensitivity, empathy, and humility in their relationships with friends and strangers, as well as respect for the privacy and individualism of others. Canadians are generally thought to be friendly, polite, and respectful to both friends and strangers alike. Canada basically follows standard Western cultural traditions in regards to things like greetings, rude gesture, and gift giving. So Canada, part of their greetings is handshake. So they considered it taboo or rude when a Canadian offers a handshake or extend their hand and you completely ignore it. So they find it rude. And they also find rude gestures such as raising of middle fingers, pointing strangers, and thumbs down. The most taboo subjects of conversation in Canada are politics, religion, and sex. So unlike here in the Philippines, where our co-Filipinos are really vocal and open about their political views, I know that you even saw on Facebook that a lot of people are exchanging harsh comments, and some are even canceling their friends and their relatives because they have different presidential bets and political view. But for me, I don't think that is necessary anymore because choosing who's your president or who's your political bet is purely a private matter and a personal choice. And no matter how different your views is, you should not go to the point where you humiliate someone, you step down on them, and then say harsh words with regards to their looks and their appearance, because it's not um necessary anymore. Another another considered taboo subjects is religion. So it's because Canada has different religions and their religious beliefs varies differently. That's why they wanted to talk it privately, not publicly. And of course, sex. So in Canada, talking about sex in public or talking about sex to someone that you are not really close with or even close with is considered as sexual harassment, as it can be as it can make someone uncomfortable and vulnerable. Next is many Canadians take seriously and enjoy the stereotype that Canadians are supposed to be very polite people. Unlike some parts of the world, Canada has waiting in line culture that encourages customers to be patient and orderly when shops or services are budging in line. Are busy, I mean. Budging in line is an enormous social taboo. So I hope that waiting in line culture became or should be adopted in the whole world, especially here in the Philippines, in the provinces, because most of the people here really budge in line, which is considered unfair for those people who really wakes up early to fall in line and then you will just budge in. So that's unfair. Next is tipping is customary and expected in Canada. It is common practice to tip waiting staff 15 to 20% of the bill in restaurants and to apply a tip of 10% for most other service providers, such as hairdressers, taxi drivers, valets. It is also customary to bartenders in Canada. So this is true because when my titas and other relatives had vacation here in the Philippines, I noticed that they always tip tip someone who gives service to them. Even if I no matter where we are, in hotel, in malls, in restaurants, in fast food chains, they always give tip to someone who offers them service. Next, last but not the least, Canadians are literal at time and schedule. So when they say 7 o'clock, they will really arrive at 7 o'clock. Literally 7 o'clock. Unlike here again in the Philippines, or unlike other Filipinos, not me, I'm not included. When you say we'll meet at 7 a.m., they will arrive at 7:30 or 8 a.m. So I think that we should practice to really um be literal at time and schedule, as we should not waste other people's time because time is very precious. Time is gold. Now we are on the high culture and art in Canada. As a young, solidly middle class nation with humble immigrant beginnings, the creation of distinctly Canadian style of high culture, which is to say, distinct Canadian traditions of art, literature, and theater, has been a long, slow journey for most of Canadian history. Canada's most wealthy and elite citizens simply imported the finest paintings, books, and plays from Britain and Europe. Canadian art. If there's a defining style of Canadian visual art, it's probably the landscape. Canada's exotic natural beauty was tremendously alluring to European artists in the 19th century. The earliest, most famous works of Canadian art are heavily romanticized depictions of lush Eastern Canadian landscape painted by European immigrants, like Paul Kane. of Ireland and Cornelius Krieghoff of Holland. By the early 20th century, depictions of the Canadian landscape gradually became more harsh and realistic. The most famous artist of this latter tradition was so-called Group of Seven, seven artists who produced a number of great pseudo-impressionist work. On the left side, you can see the painting of Robert Bateman entitled Great Blue Heron. So, along with the landscape, photorealistic paintings of animals have long been a mainstay of Canadian art, though these are often more popular with ordinary people than critics. So, Robert Bateman has spent decades as Canada's most popular animal painter with a widely emulated style that has helped define a genre. Prints of his work can be seen in living rooms and on jigsaw puzzles across the nation. In the latter half of 20th century, the Canadian art scene greatly diversified, moving away from depictions of natural and towards new experimental styles that often didn't depict anything in particular. In Quebec, a group of abstract artists headed by Paul-Émile Portwas, known as the Les Automatistes. Today, virtually every art tradition has practitioners in modern Canada, from still lifes to the wild mixed media works found in modern art museums like the National Gallery in Ottawa or Toronto's Power Plant Contemporary Art Gallery. On the right side, you can see the members of the group of seven. On the right side, again, you can see the Canadian iconic work of art. And on the left side, you can see the sculpture Raven, Raven and First Man by Bill Reed. So perhaps it is the most famous piece of Indigenous artwork by Canada's most famous Indigenous artist. Moving forward to the Canadian sports. I know you know whether they're in it for a competition, teamwork, or fitness, sports have been a long favorite pastime of Canadians, whether watching or playing. Though hockey and football remain the country's most clinched and famous, virtually every major organized sport has its share of Canadian fans, and the nation is home to the vast array of professional teams, leagues, and players just waiting to be cheered or booed. Canada's two famous popular professional sports are hockey and football. Stereotypical though it may be, there's no escaping the fact that Canadians really love their hockey. Forged in the early 19th century, but popularized and structured as professional sport in the 1910s, hockey has held an outside role in Canadian culture ever romanticized image as a rough and tumble game Canadians have played for generations on frozen lakes in the long winter months in a sport whose ancient rule, loyalties, and tradition can be passed down to teach important lessons about community, sportsmanship, teamwork, and athleticism. Lacrosse and curling are two highly iconic Canadian sports, but have only limited public appeal. Almost every major sport is enjoyed in Canada to some degree, and the country is home to countless amateur leagues and athletes. The present Now we are moving forward to Canada's flag. The present national flag of Canada is the maple leaf. It represents the unity of the country. Prior to the 1965, Canada used a modified British flag, which you can see on the second picture. And also, every province of Canada has its own flag as well, just like here in the Philippines, where the provinces have their own flags, even the towns and the cities have their own flags too. The same with Canadian cities, sometimes they have their own flags. but these are rarely seen and fairly obscure. The Canadian food. Sure, the lakes and the stuffs are nice, and we hear there are some pretty mountains too, but let's not kid ourselves. Canada is also home to epic Canadian food that you will love to taste. First on the list is poutine. So few Canadian dishes are as world renowned as the glorious creation known as poutine. Crispy fries, squeaky cheese curds, and rich gravy all combine to create the meal of dreams. And this French Canadian food is so popular that it can now be found all around the world. Next is the bannock. Bannock is usually described by Canadians as delicious and versatile. Bannock is a simple bread that was once a key staple in the diets of Canadians' Aboriginal people. Modern takes on bannock include baked versions, which are heavy or dense, and fried versions, which are crispy and fluffy on the inside. In recent years, bannock has seen a surge in popularity, with new twists and variations popping up in bakeries and cafes nationwide. On the third list is butter tarts. So butter tarts are so simple but oh so good. They're made by taking flaky pastry shells and filling them with butter, sugar, and egg filling. This traditional Canadian food at its best, and you'll be craving this long after you've left the country. On the fourth picture is the Nova Scotian lobster roll. So, as we all know, Canada is a massive country with spectacular seafood from coast to coast. Not to be missed experiences include the Atlantic and Pacific salmon, smoked salmon, and Arctic char, and of course, East Coast lobster. Nova Scotian lobster rolls are Canadians' favorite. On the fifth picture is Montreal style bagels. So Montreal's bagels are the unsung heroes of great Canadian food. Sweeter, denser, and thinner than their NYC counterparts. Montreal bagels are baked in wood fire ovens and are often covered in poppy or sesame seeds. The two heavyweights in the Montreal bagel game are Saint Piotr and Paramount Bagel, both of which are amazing. On the sixth picture is the Saskatoon berry pie. It is often described as having a sweet and almondy flavor, which make it an ideal candidate for the perfect pie. Truly, a slice of this will change your life. It's no wonder the city of Saskatoon was actually named after it, rather than the other way around. On the seventh picture is the Montreal. That's Montreal, I'm sorry. Montreal style smoked meat. Similar to pastrami, Montreal smoked meat is the heavenly result of beef brisket salted and cured for a week with a range of spices before being smoked and steamed to perfection. It's usually served in a rye bread sandwich smeared with tangy yellow mustard, and you'll also see it as a topping for poutine. And last but not the least, this is not a food, but can't ignore, I cannot let this not be on the list. So the Canadian maple syrup. Though Canada is popularly known as the home of maple syrup, most of the natural product actually comes from a specific part of the country, which is Quebec. Today, the French-speaking province supplies roughly two-thirds of the world's maple syrup. Canada's government. So before I do this presentation, I was really shocked. Shocked is that the right term? I was amazed because I wasn't expecting that Canada's government is like this. So the first question that comes into my mind is who's in charge? So politics plays a large role in Canadian life and identity. The country has been a functional democracy for nearly 150 years, and Canadians are proud of their history as free people with a government that generally respects their wishes and protects their rights. Freedom also means that Canadians have the right to be unsatisfied, however, and Canadian politics will reliably reflect the deep divisions of such a large and diverse country. So the British monarch is the head of state of Canada. The monarch is represented by a governor general, which I will be discussing later, who has very limited powers. Laws are made by Canada's elected federal government, which includes a parliament and a prime minister. So to better understand Canada's government, I have prepared some chapters. So the first chapter is the Constitution of Canada. So the Constitution of Canada provides the rules that Canada's government must follow, both in terms of how the government operates politically as well as what it can and cannot do to its citizens. So the Constitution of Canada provides the rules that Canada's government must follow, both in terms of how the government operates politically as well as what it can and cannot do to its citizens. So, the current Canadian Constitution was written in 1867 and has been repeatedly amended since then. The Charter of Rights is the 1982 tradition of the Constitution that outlines the civil rights of every Canadian citizen. The Canadian Constitution can only be amended with approval of the provincial government. After a series of both amendments in 1980s and 1990s attempting to fix the Canadian Constitution has become a very unpopular topic in Canadian politics. I'm sorry if I reread the Constitution of Canada earlier. So what is the Constitution of Canada? So when we talked about Constitution of Canada, we're not talking about a single document, but rather a bunch of different ones that collectively make up the highest level of Canadian law. Next is the Canadian parliamentary system. So Canada's form of government is based on the British parliamentary system, also known as Westminster system. It is a style of democracy adapted from centuries of English tradition. Canada's founder believed that the British had the best form of government in the world, and the opening lines of the Canadian Constitution promise that Canada will have a constitution similar in principle to that of United Kingdom. The Parliament of Canada is separated into two chambers, an elected House of Commons and an appointed Senate. So I'm sorry. So housed in an enormous neo-Gothic building in the capital city of Ottawa, Ontario, Canada's national parliament is a bicameral legislature, meaning it's split into two chambers, which is again the House of Commons and the House of Senate. So the House of Commons has two basic jobs, which is to propose and pass law and deciding who gets to be the prime minister. So, the House of Commons consists of 338 elected members of parliament that are known as MPs. So, which means member of the parliamentary, each of whom represents a different electoral district, also known as riding or constituency. So, electoral district or riding, which have a specific which is a specific geographic region of the country. The different provinces of Canada are divided into ridings or electoral district to the principle of representation by population, which means the larger provinces elect more MPs than the smaller ones. The House of Senate, on the other hand, has consists of 105 politicians known as senators who have been appointed by various Canadian prime minister. They used to serve for life, but in 1965 this was changed to merely make their terms last until their 75th birthday. Senators cannot be fired by the prime minister, but the Senate can vote to remove members from the office if they are found guilty of committing what the Constitution describes as infamous crime. Whenever a senator dies, resigns, or is removed, or reaches the age limit, the sitting prime minister of the Canada gets to appoint a replacement, meaning at any given time the Senate is hodgepodge of various appointments dating back several different prime ministerial administrators. It should go without saying that prime ministers always appoint senators from their own political party. Next is the monarchy in Canada. Many foreigners and even some Canadians and even me honestly, I'm surprised to learn that Canada is a monarchy because I really don't watch National Geographic and I don't really read books. So, which means that the country's political system is always headed by a king or a queen. So, Canada's monarchy system is a bit more complicated and unusual than most other. So, as we learned in the history chapter, which I discussed earlier, Canada was once a colony of Britain. But unlike many of England's other colonies, Canada never experienced a sharp, clean break with the motherland. Canadian independence evolved slowly under British colonial supervision, and Canada's system of government was largely copied from Britain, including the role of the British monarchy. Though Canada now has full political independence from the UK, the British monarchy is still part of Canadian political system to this day. In an unusual state of affairs, in an unusual state of affairs that is sometimes described as shared monarchy between Canada and Britain. So the Queen does not play an active role in Canadian politics and her powers are mostly symbolic. So in recent years, Canadians have become more critical of the monarchy and often debate its future. Since the Queen only occasionally visits Canada, her day-to-day symbolic duties are performed by the Governor General, the Prime Minister of Canada. The Prime Minister is the head of Canadian government and ruler of Canada. So take note of the difference between the Queen and the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is the head of Canadian government, while the Queen again is the head of the state. So a person becomes a Prime Minister by being leader of a political party that wins the most seats in the House of Commons, which I also discussed earlier in the Canadian federal election. The Prime Minister runs the legislative process by controlling his MPs in the House and instructing them what bills to introduce and how to vote. The Prime Minister's office is extremely strong and he directly appoints most of the higher ranking officials in the Canadian government. Governor General of Canada, on the other hand, is a man or a woman who serves as Canada's ceremonial head of state on behalf of Queen Elizabeth. So, Governor Generals were originally English aristocrats appointed by Britain. Now they're Canadian citizens appointed by the Prime Minister. Like the Queen, the Governor General is mostly a symbolic figurehead who occasionally performs ceremonial duties. In times of political crisis, the Governor General has the power to intervene in politics, though this has not been done in over 80 years. So that ends the government of Canada. Now we will proceed to the currency of Canada. The currency in Canada is the Canadian dollar. Canada's currency is known as the Canadian dollar, which is divided into 100%. The Canadian dollar is one of the world's highest value currencies. Canadians make purchase using a variety of small coins and five larger value bills. Canada's bills and coins all feature pictures of important national symbols. So, as you can see on the upper right corner of the screen, there is a 1,000 Canadian dollar. So that 1,000 Canadian dollar really exists before. However, they removed it as they noticed that it has become a heavy favorite of like kidnappers, syndicates, and drug lords. So you know the reason why they love it. Of course, it's common sense. And on the lower left, on the lower left of the 1,000 Canadian bill is the example of the new banknote, which is the $20 bill. So is Canada gonna be a cashless society? So cash, which is to say paper and coin money, is used less and less in Canada these days, and Canada is often ranked highly as a country in which cash-free shopping is very easy. Most Canadian stores and restaurants allow purchases to be made with credit cards or debit cards, and many of these cards now use cheap technology, allowing for one-touch tap purchases through wireless payment and machines, making paying for things vastly faster and easier than handling cash. So let me ask you guys a question. What do you prefer to use? Do you prefer to use cash or do you prefer to use debit cards or any cards? As for me, when I do online shopping, I prefer using cards because it has discounts, and when the parcel, you will not think of like you will not think of the payment. You will just wait until you receive it. Unlike when you chose cash on delivery, you will keep thinking your where to get money because you already spend it on some other things. So it's really better to use cards when doing online shopping. But that's just for me. Next is Canada's economy. Canada is one of the world's richest nations with a highly sophisticated economy and a top tier standard of living, which is the reason many Filipinos as well love living in Canada. Though obviously not everyone in Canada is equally well off, most Canadians nevertheless hold reasonably well paying jobs and access to ample creature compared to citizens in many other countries can only dream of. So Canada is one of the world's richest countries. The Canadian economy has historically been based around trading natural resources, but is now dominated by the service sector. Canada and the United States have a very high tight economic relationship, and 80% of all Canadian trade is with the US. Though Canada has generally free market economy, the government still plays a large role in regulating and subsidizing many industry. Canada has the ninth largest economy in the world as of 2020, with a GDP of 1.64 trillion US dollar. International trade, including both exports and imports, is a large component of Canada's economy, each making up about one third of its GDP. Canada's largest trading partner are the US, China, and the UK. Now we are on the last part of the report, which is the must visit places and attractions in Canada. So, Canada is a large, diverse country with a lot going for it, but most tourists are drawn to few of the same things. Canada's nature. Canada has one of the most beautiful countries in the world, full of amazing forests, mountains, and lakes that make it a fantastic place for camping, hiking, or just wandering around and admiring. Also, tourists are drawn to winter sports in Canada. Canada's snowy climate and mountainous geography has produced no shortage of mass visit parks and resorts for anyone interested in skiing, snowboarding, sn- snowshoeing, or any other activity best enjoyed in the cold. Also, tourists visit Canada's wonderful city. So, Canada is home to several large modern cities that anyone with a taste of urban life will be able to appreciate. And lastly, Canada's cost. So, the Canadian dollar is generally quite weak in comparison to other currencies, which make it very affordable option for people without too much money in their travel budgets. First on the list of must visit attractions in Canada is, of course, its famous Niagara Falls. So, Niagara and Niagara Gorge have been attracting tourists and daredevils for well over a century. Between the mid 19th and mid 20th centuries, there were numerous attempts to plunge over the falls in various types of homemade boats and barrels. These, along with the tightrope walkers and other spectacles lead to the adjacent town of Niagara Falls, developing a carnival type atmosphere that still persists today. Families will enjoy a walk down Niagara's outrageous Clifton Hill, leading the gorge and falls. Other popular things to do here include a cruise to the base of the falls, a trip up to Skyline Tower for a fantastic aerial view, and look from the bottom of the falls on the journey behind the falls experience. So, the Niagara Falls, as you can see on the left side, is Canada's most famous natural attraction, bringing in millions of visitors each year. Located just over an hour drive from Toronto, along the American border, these massive falls drop approximately 57 meters. You can see the falls at an outstandingly close distance from several key points. Next is the Banff National Park and Rocky Mountains. So lies in the heart of the majestic Rocky Mountains in the province of Alberta and showcases some of Canada's most beautiful scenery. The jewel of the park is the Lake Louise, where green waters reflects the surrounding mountains and glaciers, and visitors can stroll easily around the shore. Just a short distance is Moraine Lake, another impressive alpine lake with an even slightly more dramatic surrounding. So you can see the blue, it's not blue, it's clear sky blue water. Toronto CN Tower. On the shores of Lake Ontario in Canada's biggest city is the iconic CN Tower, one of Canada's most famous landmarks. The tower stands an impressive 553 meters high and dominates the skyline. At the top, you can find fine dining in the revolving 360 restaurant and enjoy a meal while looking out over the city and lake. So when you look at Toronto CN Tower, as I look at Toronto CN Tower, is I noticed that it's quite the same with the Ensol Tower in Seoul, Korea. Or is it just me? Moving forward to the Old Quebec. Old Quebec is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of Canada's historic gems. Spread across the upper and lower of town of Quebec, this area contains the city's most historic buildings. The lower town along the St. Lawrence River is the site of the original settlement and home to the outstanding Pemont de Chateau Frontenac, as well as the numerous other treasures. The upper town rests on 100-meter high cliffs and is home to the Citadel, the Plains of Abraham, Place Tion, the Parque Historic del Artillery. I don't know how to pronounce it properly. So, the Old Quebec is one of Canada's most popular historical areas and is well developed for tourism. In addition to the historical sites, other highlights include artists displaying their works on Rue du Trésor. It is an interesting museum, like the Musée de la Civilisation, and unique shops and restaurants. Whistler, just 2 hour drive from the Vancouver, is the famous ski resort of Whistler Blackcomb and the year-round resort destination of Whistler. While Whistler has always been an important winter sports area, it has also developed into a popular summer destination with golf, mountain biking, and lively town as atmosphere no matter when you visit. So the village gained international attention in 2010 when it became one of the locations for the 2010 Winter Olympic Games. Next is Ottawa's Parliament Hill, which stands high above the Ottawa River and is graced by the neo-Gothic style Parliament buildings built in the last half of the 19th century. The most prominent feature is the Peace Tower, which divides the House of Commons and the House of Senate on either side. In front of the Parliament building is the Centennial Flame, lit in 1966 to commemorate the centenary of the Canadian Confederation. And behind the buildings are the sculpture garden. Next is St. John's Signal Hill National Historic Park. So, at the entrance of St. John's Harbor, overlooking the city and sea, is the Signal Hill National Historic Site. So, it was here in 1901 that the first wireless transatlantic signal was received. It also played a strategic role in the Seven Years' War with France, although the current fortifications were built during the hostilities of 1812. Old Montreal. So Old Montreal, lined with the lovely historic buildings, is a place to go for great shopping and fine dining. So while Montreal itself is a vibrant modern city, Montreal down the waterfront is where you all want to go to soak up the atmosphere. Some of the must-see places in Old Montreal include Raw Bonsi Course and the landmark Marquet Bonsi Course Bonsico in the Old Town Hall building, the interior of the beautiful Notre Dame Basilica, the lively place Jacques Cartier, and the 1870s City Hall. Vancouver Island. Although it is less than 2 hour ride from the mainland Vancouver Island, although it is less than 2 hour ferry ride from the mainland, Vancouver Island can seem a world away. Most people head to Victoria, British Columbia's capital city, for sightseeing and culture. But if you head north into the wild and remote landscape, the island holds some unexpected and unforgettable experiences. Nature lovers can hit the best hiking trails on Vancouver Island and set themselves up at some beautiful camping locations. Those looking for more comfort can always turn to one of the island's lodges or resorts. One of the island's most incredible sights are the old growth forests of giant trees, some more than 1,000 years old, which you can see on the picture. It's very huge. Within day tripping distance of Victoria are the ancient trees of Eden Grove near the town of Port Renfrew. If you are heading up island, you can also wander through Cathedral Grove, not far from the town of Port Alberni, or go all the way out to Tofino to see even more huge trees. Bay of Fundy. The Bay of Plenty, located in eastern Canada in between New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, is known for its amazing tides. The variation between high and low is largest in the world, measuring up to a maximum of 19 meters. While there are many ways to appreciate this natural wonder, some of the most popular locations and sites along the Bay of Plenty are the Cliffs and Rocks Formation at Hopewell Cape, Fundy National Park and Fundy Trail Parkway, and Grand Manan Island. Next is Victoria's Inner Harbor. So few Canadian cities have done such a beautiful job for developing their water-prone area as Victoria and its inner harbor. This is a great place for strolling, relaxing, shopping, dining, and watching street performers all against the backdrop of the harbor. The centerpiece of this area is the historic Empress Hotel, one of the city's most lovely buildings. Over the years, the Empress has welcomed kings and queens and today features a traditional high tea, which is one of the highlights for many visitors coming to Victoria. While the harbor area is popular year round, it is particularly lively during the summer months. Next is the Crossmore National Park. Newfoundland's Crossmore National Park is more remote than many of Canada's most popular national parks, but this park is worth the effort to discover as is a beautiful landscape of mountains and forts. The park is a UNESCO World Heritage Site featuring steep cliffs walls, waterfalls, and interesting rock formations carved by the glacier fed waters. Most visitors take a boat tour to appreciate the scenery, but there are also hiking trails and opportunities for kayaking. In winter, the park receives far fewer visitors, but it is open for ski touring, complete with backcountry ski hunts. Vancouver Stanley Park. One of Vancouver's greatest treasure is the 405-hectare Stanley Park, conveniently located on the west side of the downtown area. Situated on a peninsula, the park is surrounded by the ocean and home to huge red cedar and Douglas fir trees. The seawall which rings the park has an extensive walking, jogging, and biking path with designated lanes for walkers and bikers. From the seawall are some lovely views of the city and mountains. A scenic drive also winds through Stanley Park with numerous pool outs. Within the park are Vancouver Aquarium, Scenic River Lake, and the Stanley Park Pavilion and Rose Garden. Next is the Calgary Stampede. So, this 10-day affair is one of the most widely anticipated events in Western Canada, with many locals and summertime travelers planning their holidays around the Calgary Stampede. So, for the week in July, the city of Calgary turns into a true Western town where people who might otherwise be wearing suits to work instead don jeans and cowboy boots. At the stamping grounds are daily rodeo events drawing participants from across North America. Thrill rides, games, food, and the nightly grandstand show. The Canadian Museum for Human Rights. Winnipeg's newest attraction, which has drawn both national and international attention, is the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. Opening in 2014 near the ports, the building displays a unique design that is eye-catching to say the least, with geometry and colors based on images of the Canadian landscape. Also unique is the concept behind the museum, which proved controversial when deciding which histories would be featured here. Yes, because they have really uh, I don't know what do you call that kind of history. What's that? The museum highlights personal stories, capturing different perspectives and focuses on a range of themes. The Okanagan Valley. Some locals who live in Penticton and Kelowna like to say that the Okanagan Valley is located on the warm side of the mountains from neighboring Alberta. This statement rings true. This long valley is truly a summer playground for Western Canadians. Huge lakes dominate the valley floor, and some of the British Columbia's best beaches can be found can also be found here. Offshore from the lively cities, canoeing, pleasure boating, and sailing are all popular activities, and every sunny summer day the lakes are filled with smiling, laughing people having fun. Along the gentle inclines leading up from the lakes, you'll find farms growing some of Canada's best fruit, including cherries, peaches, pears, and plums, among many others. Places to stay are numerous. Quality accommodation can also be found in both Penticton and Kelowna. So that ends the must visit attraction in Canada, but I do think there are still lots. You can search it on Facebook, and I hope that I was able to give you a hint and that Canada is now part of your bucket list. To review, here are some facts and statistics about Canada. So its location is North America, and its capital is Ottawa. Its flag is the Canadian flag known unofficially as the Maple. National anthem is the O Canada. Nationality is Canadian. Ethnic makeup is British, French, European, Amerindian, Asian, African, Arab, and mixed background. Its population is over 37 million as of 2019, and its population growth rate as of 2016 was estimated as 5%. Its climate varies from temperature in south to subarctic and arctic in the north. Its time zone, it has six: the Pacific, the Mountain, the Central, the Eastern, the Atlantic, and the Newfoundland. Its currency is the Canadian dollar, and its government is federal parliamentary democracy under a constitutional monarchy or a Commonwealth realm. Its business culture ranks 16 in the Business Culture Complexity Index. So I hope that you really understand my report and I was able to present it in a way that you understand it. So that ends my report, but I still want to show you my travel guide. So travel guide. So this is how my travel guide looks like. Oh, can you please wait a moment? So this is how my travel guide looks like. On the first page, you can see the background. It's Canada. Your Wanderlust Guide to Travel in Canada by Mayor Rallo. So on the second page, I just incorporated facts and information about Canada. And on the third page, you can see before you go, steps for fully vaccinated travelers. So, information on how to travel to Canada and the needed requirements. And also on the fourth, you can see the visa and passport requirements. So, I also incorporated when is the best time to go. And next, so on the fourth and fifth, that's when is the best time to go. I also incorporated some pictures for you to better um um better to like envision it. On the sixth page is travel guide best booking resources. So which to book, then travel costs, then where to stay in Canada, how to get around Canada, five things to see and do in Canada, other things to do in Canada, and of course the must visit places and attraction in Canada. So that's it for today, and I hope you've learned something. Thank you and goodbye.